Hi, Nick Dogue with North State Law, where we safeguard your professional license so you can get back to business. Today, we're going to talk about who is most likely to file a complaint against a plumber, HVAC, fire sprinkler contractor. So, I've done some other videos along the same topic. You've seen probably the electrician one, general contractor. I believe I've done a couple other ones as well. If you haven't seen those, I encourage you to check those out as well. You'll see some common themes, especially when it comes to trade work, as I'm about to talk about with plumbing and HVAC, fire sprinkler contractors. So I've seen probably about the four most common, and I could probably name a couple one-offs here and there, but honestly, we're going to stick to the most common ones, and it is going to be these four that I'm about to talk about. The first one that I see is most common is typically going to come from your planning department because they're obviously going to see the type of work done. They're going to do the inspections. They're going to see if a permit's pulled. And if it's not, that's going to be a big no-no. So we want to make sure that all permits are pulled. It's pulled under the name of the person doing the work, company doing the work, things like that. Because not only is that going to be the most common way to avoid a complaint, because right, like if the most common complaints that I'm seeing are from planning department employees, inspectors, and you're able to comply with everything that they're normally going to have an issue with, like not pulling a permit or not calling in an inspection timely, kind of things like that, then you're probably going to have a higher likelihood of not receiving a complaint at all. The other thing is when an inspector files a complaint with the Plumbing, HVAC, Fire Sprinkler Contract Board, those are going to have in the mind of the board and the board investigator and members of the board more credibility than if it comes from somebody else, because the inspectors are people that typically have been in the industry for a while. Most of the time, they're pretty knowledgeable, especially when it comes with kind of the basic rule structure. They sometimes might not be that knowledgeable about the actual work. And I'll give a quick example of that. I had a plumber that I was doing some work for, had a complaint. We do it was a sit down meeting with the executive director, investigator, and one of the members of the plumbing HVAC board. And they explained to us, hey, we've had a number of complaints over in, I believe this was Mecklenburg County area, with one of the inspectors out there telling plumbers and HVAC guys that, hey, you don't have to do X, Y, or Z. It might be in the code, but I'm not going by what the state board's code is. I'm going to utilize my own. And that led to a lot of complaints against plumbers and HVAC guys in that area. And my client hadn't done anything along those lines, but that was kind of like a unique example that they had given us, just kind of chit chatting, that I thought was pretty interesting. That the inspectors, their job is to go and inspect, make sure that plumbing, for example, the plumbing work is done to code, and make sure that the permits were pulled, things like that. But even some of the inspectors get it wrong sometimes. They look at it and go, well, it might be in the code for the North Carolina board, but it's not in our local code, so you don't have to do it. And that's not the case. Like if something is required per the administrative code for the plumbing, HVAC, fire sprinkler contracting board, or it's part of their general statute, it has to be adhered to by a licensee, right? So that was kind of like one of those humorous anecdotes that we were told. Again, it wasn't anything that my client had done. It was kind of a side story when we were chit-chatting, getting to know him a little bit more. So number one, obviously, is going to come from the inspectors, from planning departments. Number two is going to come from the general public. Obviously, you're going to have customers, former customers, that are going to be disgruntled for one reason or another. I will say that if it's a legitimate complaint, the best thing to do is to try to mitigate that. Say, hey, sorry this happened. I'm going to go out there personally. Say you're the owner qualifier of the company, and you'd sent somebody out there. they didn't do the job that you normally would do or normally would expect somebody in your company to do. Customer complains, the best thing to do is, talk to them. If they leave a bad Google review, try to take that offline and say, hey, this doesn't, I'd like to talk about this with you over the phone. If you got a couple minutes, please give me a call. And if they don't call you after a couple of days, try to reach out to them. Or try to reach out to them, right away, and also leave a response on their Google review if they leave one. And if they don't, still reach out to them and say, hey, I'm sorry. Tell me a little bit more about what's going on. I want to make this right. What can we do? When you're proactive like that and you're trying to make sure that the issue is addressed with your customer, 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to avoid a complaint. And even if you don't avoid a complaint, by doing that, if the complaint ends up going through the normal process, it doesn't get dismissed right away, and you have to have a meeting with at least the executive director and one of the members of the board and the investigator, you can say, hey, this is what I've done to correct that. I fixed the issue for the customer. I understand that they were upset and maybe they didn't give me a long opportunity to fix this, but I did fix it. Here's my proof. That's going to go a long way with the board. Now, on the other side of that, so we're going from legitimate complaints all the way to the other side of like illegitimate complaints from customers, because that happens a lot as well. People get upset, they don't want to pay a bill. It's, oh, how dare you want to actually get paid for not only the materials but your labor. I don't want to pay that. Well, the job's already done, you owe me like $6,000. Wow, I shouldn't have to pay that. And then they file a complaint with the board. Nothing to do with the work. Nothing to do with lack of pulling a permit or anything along those lines. Nothing to do with rule violation. They're just upset because they don't want to pay their bill. That happens. You've probably seen it multiple times. And it as a business owner is frustrating because, you go out there, you do good work, you give an estimate, everybody agrees on the price, everybody agrees on the scope of work and things like that. And then when push comes to shove and they got to finish paying the bill, sometimes people react in very unprofessional ways and ways that really disrupt the business. And one of those can be, and sometimes is, filing a complaint with the board. So on those, you just got to kind of keep really good records of everything, have a contract, show the estimate, show that the estimate was sent, so the contract was signed if you have one. Just document is probably the best way to mitigate any damages from a complaint when it's filed. So that's number two, customers. So far we have number one is going to be from inspectors with planning departments. Number two is going to be from the general public. Number three is going to be ex-employees. This happens. It's not super frequent, but it does happen. As you can imagine, sometimes when somebody has to be let go or they otherwise quit because they feel like they're not being valued as much as they think they should be valued, there might be some bad blood, and as a result, somebody might file a complaint against, a plumber, HVAC, fire sprinkler contractor. In those particular situations, again, documentation is key. That is going to be necessary in any of these complaints that I'm talking about. And this is another one that's kind of in line with like a disgruntled ex-customer or something like that. As long as you're able to document everything that you have done and show that it was done properly, or, hey, maybe there was a mistake that happened. But if you're able to show that the mistake was corrected and everybody's happy, being the customer, first and foremost, then a complaint by a former disgruntled employee is probably going to be, you're going to have a higher probability of dealing with it in a better manner than if you just ignored it or you kept terrible records or no records at all and things like that. Because the last thing you want is a he said, or she said, he said situation where you have no documentation to back up anything that you're saying, and then the board's just relying on either what the complainant's saying, in this case, a disgruntled employee, or you as the licensee, when you don't have anything to say like, well, hey, here's the proof. And so you want to keep really good records and documentation for multitude of reasons, including but not limited to any complaints by customers, by disgruntled ex-employees, inspectors, kind of things like that. And that includes emails and text as well. Make sure you get copies of all of that stuff. So, last one that I can really think of, and again, this is super uncommon, but the fourth most common complaint that I've seen, or somebody that is likely to file a complaint against a plumber, HVAC, fire sprinkler contractor, would be a former business partner, or somebody that you had done a lot of work that might not necessarily be an employee, but could be somebody that you've been a partnership with in your company and things kind of turn sideways, or you've had a partnership type agreement with somebody like a GC that you've done a lot of work with. And maybe those relationships have soured over the years. Maybe they did something that shouldn't have been done, and you were like, I can't work with this person anymore. This is too shady of a deal. Or maybe somebody got stiffed on money at somewhere, or there's some discrepancy as far as that's concerned. But that is something that does happen. I wouldn't say it's super common. I think it's common, kind of in line with like a disgruntled ex-employee. But it is something that happened. And again, record keeping, documentation, especially communication between the parties, that's going to be huge. If there are other people involved, getting affidavits from them might be, definitely would be worthwhile. Say you're having a dispute with a partnership starting to dissolve. You guys get lawyers involved. Nobody wants that, and you finally work something out where there's a buyout or whatever the case may be, and you're severing ties with the person. If there's a complaint filed by the other individual, I think getting affidavits from employees that would be knowledgeable about what was going on would be useful, right? Because it's not just going to be you and the ex-partner that are privy to a lot of this information that's going on that might have led to their filing of a complaint with the board. There's going to be some employees going, you might have somebody in the in office, and you might have somebody out in the field. It might be a little bit of both that has useful information and able to put it down on an affidavit for you and help you back up your side of the story with the board. In addition to that, even though we don't do civil cases, but with split ups like that or disputes with the GC, sometimes civil matters arise. And somebody files a lawsuit or something along those lines. Again, documentation would be huge. Having affidavits from employees that are knowledgeable about what was going on, those can be extremely helpful also. And one of those things, and this is a lot easier said than done, but just having a good rapport with people and trying to be reasonable usually goes a long, long way. Ignoring situations really doesn't end up in most people's favor, to be honest with you. And even if you do everything that we're talking about, you document properly, you have a good relation, you try your best to have good relationships with people. Sometimes things happen and a complaint will still pop up. Now, I've known people that have come to me after 30, 35, 40 years of being in business, and hey, I'd never had a complaint before. I mean, that's great. And then something pops up out of the blue, and it's just sometimes out of your control. You do the best that you can. You put yourself in the best situation as possible to where if there is a complaint file that you could get it dismissed, or it's likely to be dismissed, or if it's not, that it's going to be a really, really, really minor set of circumstances that, result in a really slap on the wrist or something along those lines. So those are the top four that I've come across as the top four people that file a complaint against a plumbing, HVAC, fire sprinkler contractor in North Carolina. If you got any questions on anything that I talked about or anything else, check out the blogs on my website, northstatelawfirm.com. Also, you found the YouTube channel. It's North State Laws. So check out all the other videos I have there. And if you still can't find what you're looking for in any of those spots, then please give us a call or text at 919-521-8810. That's 919-521-8810. And you can get a free 15-minute discovery call with a member of my staff. Thank you so much for taking care of North Carolina. Keep the pipes flowing. Bye-bye.